Hello and welcome to this session on deconstructing and demystifying the cloud native application stack. My name is Janakiram MSV. I'm a CNCF ambassador, architect, and an analyst based out of Hyderabad. It's my pleasure to bring you this session on cloud native computing. So when it comes to the agenda, I have a pretty packed content. I'm going to start off with the evolution of cloud native. It's important to understand what precedes cloud native. So I'm going to spend a minute on that. Then we'll take a closer look at the big picture of the cloud native stack, followed by the key building blocks, the commercial and the OSS projects, and finally a summary of what we discussed. So let's get started. Cloud ready versus cloud native. Well, cloud ready is the first generation of cloud where we had physical hardware followed by the software defined layers for compute, storage, networking, and then a layer that basically targeted the security and management. And on top of this ran cloud ready applications. Essentially, cloud ready was all about virtual machines and lifting and shifting workloads from the enterprise data center to the cloud. Now, when it comes to cloud native, we have a layer in between the building blocks and the applications. And that is the whole new containerization and the orchestration platform. And that is the focus for today's talk. So cloud native brings in an abstraction on top of virtual machines, virtual storage, and virtual networks. It creates a new microservices and a containerization layer that are capable of running modular, resilient, modern applications, which are actually called as the cloud native applications. And that brings us to the definition and the attributes of modern applications and cloud native applications. So cloud native applications are designed as microservices. It's an architectural pattern packaged and deployed in containers. That's the fundamental unit of packaging and deployment, running on elastic infrastructure, which is very dynamic software defined, and they are managed through an agile workflow, which is all about DevOps. So when you bring in these elements into your application lifecycle management, you are essentially building cloud native applications. They're also called modern applications because they take advantage of the emerging technologies. Now, modern applications are resilient. They can survive failures. They are very modular. You can update them independent of each other. They are scalable. One of the big advantages of moving to microservices and cloud native is enjoying that scalability in a very rapid form. They are agile. You can ship products, features, and iterate over them pretty rapidly. And they are portable. You target one environment, you can easily move over to the other because you have a standardized mechanism of packaging, deploying, and managing them. So these are the core attributes of modern applications, also called as the cloud native applications. When it comes to the cloud, there are many managed cloud native platforms, and Oracle Container Engine for Kubernetes is one of them. So Kubernetes is the foundation. It is the new operating system of the cloud. Now, instead of you setting up Kubernetes and managing its lifecycle, managing the lifecycle of clusters, you can take advantage of managed offerings provided by cloud vendors like Oracle. So on OCI, there is a managed Kubernetes service, which is called the Oracle Container Engine for Kubernetes. With a couple of clicks, you can provision your cluster and start using that for deploying, scaling, and managing your microservices and cloud native applications. Now let's take a closer look at the cloud native stack. So this is both on-prem and the cloud, wherever you run. These are the core building blocks, and this is how a cloud native stack is assembled. So let's take a closer look at this. So we have multiple layers. It all starts with the compute, storage, and network, and then an operating system layer followed by various other components. For example, the container runtime, storage, network, followed by service mesh, and then we have a container orchestration engine, and of course, build management, release management, and finally the developer experience. So this session is not going to provide you the details or zooming into each of these building blocks, but the objective is to provide you with the big picture. So I'm going to touch upon the critical role that each of these layers play in the overall cloud native stack, And then what are the choices available for developers and enterprises? So when you choose a container runtime, what are the available choices and why you would actually choose one against the other? But again, I'm not going to compare and contrast. That is not the objective, but to give you a big picture and provide you the ecosystem and the landscape that is available in the cloud native universe for each of these layers. So sounds exciting? Absolutely. This is the happening space in the industry, and I'm pretty excited to provide you this perspective of taking you behind the scenes to the cloud native application stack and then taking a closer look at each of these layers. So let's start with the building block, the compute, storage, and the network, which is the foundation. So irrespective of how you run Kubernetes, which is the operating system for the cloud and the cloud native stack, you need the core building blocks of compute, storage, and network. So compute can be virtual machines running in the cloud or bare metal servers running either in the data center or in the public cloud. Now you can actually provision bare metal servers even in the cloud. When it comes to storage, you need block storage available in the public cloud or direct attached storage or at least a NAS for you to provision the cloud native storage volumes. And then for network, you need a virtual network in the public cloud or a software defined networking layer running on premises. So this is the foundation on which the cloud native stack is going to be built. So you got to choose your environment before you can go ahead with any of the cloud native capabilities. Now, once you have this in place, for example, you could have hypervisor or you could run this on bare metal. But once you have this compute storage network layer, then comes in the container native or the cloud native layers or the counterparts for each of them. So let's take a look at them. So the first one is the container optimized operating system. So operating system has gone through a significant change in the context of containers. You actually don't need to run fully fledged operating systems. You can run minimalistic, lower footprint capabilities of an operating system to avoid your vulnerabilities and the attack surface, because the smaller the footprint, the better the security. So there are new breed of container optimized operating systems that are designed to run containerized workloads and Kubernetes. So let's take a look at them. So there is CoreOS, which is now acquired by Red Hat, and it is called Red Hat Enterprise Linux CoreOS or Fedora CoreOS. It's a commercial offering from Red Hat. And there is another company called Talos, which is actually building an OS for Kubernetes called Talos. And when it comes to open source, there is a fork of the original CoreOS that is called Flatcar Container Linux from Kinvolk. And now it's a part of Microsoft. Recently, Microsoft acquired them. It's an open source operating system. So these are the container optimized operating systems, which offer very low footprint and highly optimized OS layer to run your stack. Now, once you choose the operating system, you have the core building blocks, that is container runtime, container native storage, and container native network for the cloud native stack. So this sits a layer above your physical compute or virtual compute storage and network layers and give you a very different environment that is highly optimized for containers. So container runtime is basically the interface between the operating system, that is the kernel, and the containers running on top. I'm sure you're familiar with Docker. Docker is one of the container engines or runtimes. When it comes to commercial, there is Mirantis Container Runtime, which is actually the Docker Enterprise, which is rebranded after the acquisition by Mirantis. Then you have a variety of open source projects. So you have Containerd, CRI-O, Docker Community Engine, Kata Containers, Runc. Now, one thing that I want to call out is in this slide, you actually see a CNCF logo next to some of the open source projects. What it actually indicates is we have the CNCF inclusion for these projects. For example, Containerd is a CNCF project. CRI-O is also a CNCF project. So every time you see a logo, that indicates it's not only an open source project, it's also a CNCF project. It could be a sandbox. It could be an incubated project, but it is going to be a CNCF project. That's what it actually conveys. Then comes in the storage, and you have a lot of commercial choices from Red Hat, from Maya Data, Pure Storage, and so on. You also have open source alternatives like Ceph, Rook, which are very popular, Longhorn from Rancher, OpenEBS from Maya Data, and all of them are a part of the CNCF ecosystem and part of CNCF. They are actually projects, either a sandbox or an incubated project under CNCF. So these are the new storage technologies or storage layers that run on top of your existing block storage or direct attached storage. Similarly, we have container native network. So container native network takes your virtual network or your software defined network to the next level by building subnets, bridges, and the network topology for your Kubernetes clusters and containerized workloads. There are commercial options as well as open source. For example, Project Calico is very popular among the ecosystem. Cilium is getting a lot of traction. Flannel is very easy, very simple to get started. It is also an open source project. So you can choose from any of this when you're configuring network for your cloud native stack. So that concludes the building blocks of this stack, which is basically container runtime, container native storage, and container native network. Now, let's go a level above and talk about security and hardening. Now, this is very, very essential because when you're running cloud native workloads, you have many components to take care of and many components to secure. So when you are running your Kubernetes clusters in production, you got to make sure they are secure and hardened. Of course, this responsibility reduces when you are running a managed Kubernetes offering like the one available on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. But even then, you still have certain responsibility, a shared responsibility to secure your nodes, your workloads, and the container images, and so on. So security and hardening plays a very important role. So there are many commercial entities. This space is just exploding. Security is a very important aspect for cloud native. And as you can see, there are many companies. StackRox is one of them, which got acquired by Red Hat recently. Aqua is a very popular security company that is providing a variety of tools and variety of best practices for customers to run secure workloads. And when it comes to open source, we have projects like Claire, which is scanning the images for vulnerabilities, the container images before they are deployed. Falco, that actually provides policies, and same thing with Open Policy Agent, very popular, very important aspect of the Kubernetes ecosystem. And then Snyk, which is again both commercial and an open source project. So Open Policy Agent is also available as a commercial implementation. You can actually check it out, and the company that does that is Styra. So most of the open source projects are commercially available through the professional services and support, but this is the landscape of security and system hardening. Now, service mesh. So service mesh is a very important aspect. Most of the production workloads rely on a service mesh. Think of that as an application network that brings in three elements. The first one is it provides MTLS security or encryption among microservices. When microservices talk to each other within your Kubernetes cluster, you want to secure the communication between one microservice and the other in the chain of your call stack. Now, implementing that and doing it all by yourself is pretty challenging and pretty laborious. So a service mesh, through its concept of a sidecar and a proxy, automatically secures the communication between one microservice and the other. That is the first job. The second job of service mesh is traffic policies and routing policies. So you can build virtual routing policies to move the traffic or target the traffic from V1 to V2 effortlessly, declaratively. So you can define traffic routing policies that will find their path during the runtime And this enables us to do things like blue-green deployments, canary releases, and a variety of other techniques to make sure we are running the correct version and the most stable version in production. So routing policies are the second important aspects of service mesh. The third one is observability. Now, implementing tracing, implementing logging, and the observability in general is very tough. But when it comes to tracing and distributed tracing, it is much more challenging. So one of the core promises of service mesh is the distributed tracing. So you can actually configure the service mesh and enable it for your cluster, and then you automatically gain visibility into how the tracing is working and how distributed tracing is working within your applications. So that is the observability. So to summarize, service mesh offers three things. The first one is MTLS communication and security for microservices. Second thing is all about traffic and routing policies. Third thing is all about the observability via distributed tracing. So that is service mesh, and this is the most happening trend or the most happening technology within the cloud native ecosystem. So when we look at the commercial offerings, there are many, and there is going to be a lot of consolidation in this space. But the most popular ones that are used by most of the developers and enterprises is Istio and then Linkerd. So Consul from HashiCorp is also getting a lot of traction. So you have a lot of choices to choose the right service mesh. And the good news is a lot of them, almost all of them, are open source, and many of them are a part of CNCF ecosystem. They are CNCF projects. For example, Linkerd is getting a lot of attention, and you should definitely check out if you are considering a service mesh for your project. So this is the most busy segment, and there are many commercial and open source projects available for you to evaluate. Then comes the most powerful and the most crucial aspect of the stack, and that is the container orchestration engine. Now, container orchestration engine is almost like the operating system. Now, the reason why I put that on top of the other building blocks is the fact that it is going to orchestrate and own and manage all these building blocks. For example, the container orchestration engine will talk to the container runtime like Docker or Containerd to manage the life cycle of your individual containers running on various nodes of Kubernetes. Now, this is going to talk to the cloud native storage to provision persistent volumes and persistent volume claims. It is also going to talk to the container native network. And of course, security is a layer below the container orchestration engine, and so is service mesh. So though they are looking very flat, in reality, container orchestration engine will effectively coordinate various aspects from all these essential building blocks. So we need to have container orchestration engine as the Uber layer, as the overarching layer, handling both the infrastructure in terms of the compute storage network and also the workloads. So that's the reason why it is placed slightly above the other building blocks. And there is again an assumption that container orchestration engine is just Kubernetes, either upstream or one of the open source implementations. But the fact is there are many choices available for customers. So let's take a look at the container orchestration engine. Now look at the list. We have multiple choices, multiple options to consider within the commercial segment, and even within open source, there are many. You can start from the upstream Kubernetes distribution available on GitHub, and it is the most popular, powerful, and the most commonly used CNCF project. It is one of the graduated projects. Or you can choose a commercial distribution available from, for example, Red Hat, which is OpenShift Enterprise, VMware, which is Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, or Mirantis, that is Docker Enterprise, now branded as Mirantis Kubernetes Engine, and you have many choices. And even within open source, it's not just one Kubernetes. For example, you have K3s, which is an edge-enabled or edge-optimized distribution of Kubernetes. You can choose the open source version of OpenShift called OKD, the community flavor. You can choose EKS Anywhere and EKS distribution. Recently got open sourced by Amazon. Now they are even generally available. So you have plenty of choice to choose the right Kubernetes distribution, both in the commercial side of things as well as the open source. So that's the container orchestration engine. And then on top of container orchestration engine, we have other elements. But before we get there, let's spend a little bit of time understanding container registry. So container registry is actually the most important pillar. Now I put that as the pillar because it is going to be responsible for hosting your container images. If you are setting up your cluster with KubeADM or any other tool, even your Kubernetes control plane is going to run as containers. So you need to store these images locally. So that means you need to have a container registry that is going to host your container images, both system level and application level. So system level container images are the control plane components like the Kube API server, the controller, the scheduler, the kubelet, and so on. Application or the workload container images are what you build and what you push to the container registry. So by storing the container images close to your cluster by running a local registry, you are reducing the latency that is going to come into the play when you are pulling the images. So it makes a lot of sense to run a container registry as a part of your overall stack. And that is going to give you the flexibility of storing the images right in the environment and the context of your Kubernetes cluster, and integrating that with your CI/CD pipeline so that the container images land straight to the registry running next to your cluster or within your cluster. So there are many commercial offerings as well as open source choices. Docker Hub, which is the de facto, if you install Docker and do a Docker pull, Docker push, you're already using Docker Hub. There is a commercial flavor of it. You can subscribe and you will get a lot of other features, including image scanning and private repositories. You have other commercial offerings like JFrog Artifactory, Quay.io from Red Hat. And when it comes to open source, Harbor, which is from VMware, is a part of CNCF. And Project Quay was also recently open sourced. It is not a part of CNCF, but it is one of the open source choices. So you could run one of these to basically manage your container images within the cloud native stack, running in the cloud or on-prem. Then comes the important aspect of build management and release management. Now, these are the pipelines that connect your source code to your production environments. So build management takes care of taking the source code, turning them into Docker files, optimizing your Docker file, and finally building the container image and putting that into the container registry. Now, all of that is going to be managed by the build tool. Release management will actually help you in choosing the right version and the last mile delivery, which is basically moving those artifacts into production. And release management will give you the choices of performing blue-green deployments or canary releases by working closely with some of the components like service mesh. So let's take a look at build management and release management. So, if you are familiar with Jenkins, you're already using a build management tool. So you can actually use many of the commercial CI technologies. For example, Cloudbees CI is a commercial implementation of Jenkins from Cloudbees, the company that actually owns Jenkins. You can use GitHub Actions or GitLab CI or Travis CI, one of the other popular continuous integration tools, or you could use the open source equivalents like GitLab, Jenkins, and Jenkins X. So this is the build management. Now, the role of a build management tool is connect the dots between the Git repo, which is the source code repository, and your production environment. In between comes the staging, testing, and UAT and all of that. But the build management is essentially responsible for packaging and deploying, not exactly deploying, but at least packaging and storing them in the target, which is your container registry. And The deployment part is typically left to the release management. And there we have open source technologies like Spinnaker, which is becoming very popular. And Spinnaker is delivered through two companies which are well known in the ecosystem. One is Armory. The other one is called OpsMX. So both of them are delivering commercial Spinnaker offering. And when it comes to open source, there is GitOps. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to cover GitOps in this session, but it is getting a lot of traction, a lot of attention of the DevOps community. So Flux and Argo are the open source tools for performing GitOps based release management. So GitOps is actually a pull, where an agent runs in your cluster and watches a Git repo for new commits, and as soon as there is a commit to the repo, it basically pulls the artifacts and reconciles the state. It's a very fascinating architecture, and it is a very powerful mechanism to ensure that your cluster is maintained with the desired state of configuration all the time. Go check out GitOps if you're not familiar. That is going to be the next big thing when it comes to CI/CD, DevOps, and release management in the cloud native ecosystem. So we are almost coming to the end of this, but there is one very, very important pillar, and that is observability. So what is observability? Well, most of us are familiar with monitoring the infrastructure. You run agents that will collect the metrics of CPU utilization, memory consumption, disk space, and so on. But when it comes to running distributed workloads in a Kubernetes cluster, you may have tens of thousands of containers, hundreds of nodes running as a part of your infrastructure. Now, what was called as monitoring doesn't work, doesn't cut it in the new brave world of containers, because we are talking about a highly distributed, highly scalable, highly dynamic environment where the nodes are constantly scaling out and scaling down. The containers and the pods are continuously scaling in and scaling out. So you cannot really monitor that in a traditional way. That is one. Second thing is, imagine every container generating so many logs, and you have tens and thousands of those containers and pods generating a lot of logs. Now, you need to take control of this logging coming from a very distributed environment. And then comes in tracing. So you need to make sure that when an API endpoint is hit by your consumer, you need to find out how it flows through your stack, which component is responsible for that latency, or who is the culprit in this call stack, in this call chain. So that is all about tracing. Remember, I was talking about distributed tracing in service mesh. That will come back to the observability. And then you have a lot of events. So events are generated both by the infrastructure and applications. For example, in an e-commerce scenario, when an order is placed, it's an event. So basically, your infrastructure and workloads are generating a lot of metrics, lot of logs, lot of traces, and a lot of events. Now, all of them need to be consolidated, contextualized, and visualized in one single console. Now, that is the promise of observability, which is going to bring context to individual elements of monitoring, traces, logging, and events, and giving you insights into the health of your workloads and your infrastructure. So, this space has matured and evolved over a period of time. For example, ALM companies, like AppDynamics and New Relic, are now offering end-to-end observability. There are Datadog, Honeycomb, Sysdig. All of them are offering commercial SaaS-based. Some of them are based on agents, some of them are agentless, but you can subscribe to one of these services and take control of your observability. Now, if you don't want to do that, there are very powerful, very mature open source technologies like Prometheus and Grafana, FluentD, Aegir, OpenTelemetry, OpenTracing, and so on. Now, all of them are basically giving you the opportunity to consolidate and aggregate various signals like metrics, traces, and events coming from your infrastructure and applications into one unified layer, and that is the observability layer. So We covered a lot of ground. I know this could be overwhelming, but again, the objective is to show you the big picture of cloud native stack. Doesn't matter where you are running. You might be running in the cloud, you might be running it on-prem, but this is the blueprint to run your cloud native applications. So to summarize what we discussed so far, at the bottom of the stack are the compute storage network. They are not going to go away. You still need to deal with VMs. You still need to deal with bare metal servers. You still need block storage, object storage, and even distributed storage. You need software defined networking or physical networking. And then we have the container optimized operating system, which is the new breed of operating system that is aware of containers and Kubernetes. And on top of that, we'll make choices when it comes to the container runtime, like Docker, Containerd, CRI-O, Podman, and so on. Container native storage, which will give you an overlay storage on top of block storage. There we have choices like Ceph, Portworx, StorageOS, Robin, and so on. Container native network. Now this is creating a zero trust security network on top of your existing virtual network. Now this is a world by itself. And as we discussed, you have choices like Calico, Cilium, Contiv, ViewNet, and so on. Security and hardening, very important. You got to secure the nodes, you got to secure the control plane, you got to secure the network, you got to secure the images, and finally the workload. There are a variety of tools that are available for you to secure and harden your cluster, infrastructure, and workloads. And we talked about some of the tools like Aqua, Sysdig, and Falco, and Claire, which are open source and also commercial, available in the CNCF umbrella. And then Service Mesh, which is bringing application level networking by giving you traffic policies, by giving you observability and security across microservices communication. And then the most important building block is the container orchestration engine. And we looked at Kubernetes and some of the alternatives like K3s and commercial offerings like Red Hat OpenShift and VMware Tanzu. Build management is all about taking the source code and creating a Docker container image out of it. And we looked at Jenkins, JenkinsX, and a variety of build management tools. For release management, it is typically open source Spinnaker and the new GitOps mechanism based on Flux or Argo CD, which is responsible for the last mile delivery. And then we have two broad pillars: container registry, responsible for holding all your artifacts in the form of container images. And we have open source projects like Harbor from VMware, which is a part of CNCF, or you can subscribe to commercial registry like Docker Hub or run it on-prem through Red Hat's Quay and so on. Then the other important pillar is observability, and it cuts across the stack. Observability is not just specific to cloud native. And if you look at this green pillar, it is starting all the way from the compute storage network and goes till your release management, because you got to perform observability across the stack. And then finally, we have the developer experience. And developer experience, it depends on individual organizations on how they are building. This is where you have things like the Helm chart, the platform layer, and this is highly customized and assembled from a very different set of tools. So I'm not going to focus on developer experience, or I didn't focus on this because it is predominantly left to individual organizations on building that layer. So this is the big picture of cloud native stack. My objective was to provide you with the behind the scenes stuff of what goes into building a reliable, stable, robust cloud native stack. And here it is. So I hope you found this session useful. I had a lot of fun preparing, building this slide deck and presenting. I hope you had as much fun as learning this. So that brings us to the end of this session. I hope you liked it and you found this useful. Have a great conference ahead. It's again a privilege and a pleasure to be a part of Oracle Developer Days. Thank you. Have a great conference ahead. This is Janakiram signing off. Thank you.